The Serengeti hosts one of the greatest concentrations of big game in the world. And yet, each year the numbers swell even more as the migration passes through. It is a sight every wildlife enthusiast should have on their bucket list. Join us as we give you an insight into visiting the greatest wildlife stage on Earth, Serengeti, the Great Migration.
Jumbo, I'm Bill Ball, and I'm going to be your guide on this episode of Journeys in Africa. And this is Africa.
The African experience was summed up by Ernest Hemingway when he said, "All I wanted to do was get back to Africa. We had not left it yet, but when I would wake at night, I would lie, listening, homesick for it already." Join us each week as we explore the entire continent of Africa, from the plains of the Serengeti to the heights of Kilimanjaro and all points in between. We'll introduce you to the history, culture, and wildlife of one of the most exotic and extraordinary places on Earth. Journeys in Africa. The Serengeti is the most famous national park in Africa. All other national parks in the world are measured by the Serengeti. For instance, Lammer Valley in Yellowstone is called the Serengeti of America, and Kaziranga National Park is the Serengeti of India. The Serengeti is located in the northwest of Tanzania, bordering Kenya. It is part of a larger ecosystem that includes the Ngorongoro Conservation Area and the Masai Mara Game Reserve in Kenya. It is an astonishing 5,400 square miles, or slightly larger than the state of Connecticut. Not surprisingly, it is one of the largest parks in Tanzania and one of the largest in the world. The normal tourist route does Ngorongoro first and then heads to the Serengeti. It isn't long before we enter the Serengeti proper. This UNESCO World Heritage Site and Biosphere Reserve is one of the most important wildlife parks in the world. It is home to over 70 species of mammals and 518 species of birds. In sheer numbers, the animal population is awesome. 2,500 lions, the largest concentration anywhere, 1,400 plus elephants, 21,000 buffalo, 250,000 Thompson gazelle, 200,000 zebra, and over 70,000 impala. It is what most people imagine wild Africa to be. The area that is today's national park was first opened in the 1920s. By 1929, the Central Serengeti was made a full game reserve. It was declared a national park in 1951, and the present boundaries were set in 1965. The park is now open for game drives from sunup to sunset. With an extensive network of groomed dirt tracks, it is easy to get around the park to observe the plentiful wildlife. The large numbers and diversity of wildlife would be enough to warrant its own World Heritage and Biosphere Reserve status, but something very special happens here every year.
What you're about to see is simply unbelievable. The first time I saw it, I couldn't wrap my mind around the numbers. 2 million animals basically migrating from the southeast corner of the Serengeti ecosystem to the northwest corner. Every year, around the clock, they keep this migration going. And here, the biggest number of all the animals are the wildebeest. 1.5 million of these animals do that migration.
You might ask why these animals make the trek each year. They do it for the same reason we go to the grocery store or to our favorite restaurant: food. The primary migrant is the wildebeest. These comical antelope are said to have been put together by a committee using all spare parts. And yet, they are the dominant herbivore in Serengeti. Oh yeah, they sound funny too. They are thoroughly adapted to fit this environment. Their wide row of incisors can grab more grass per bite than virtually any other grazer. Of course, there is a downside to that. It is that efficiency that exhausts an area of its grasses and forces them to move on. And move on they do. They will cover hundreds of miles during the migration, and the line of wildebeest can extend over 25 miles long, with literally hundreds of thousands of animals. I'm a trivia buff, and here's a trivia fact about the migration I bet you've never heard. During the trek, the migrants create over 420 tons of dung each day. Now that's a lot of, well, you get the idea. The migration follows a general pattern of southeast to northwest, leaving the dry grasses of the Serengeti Plains and moving to the parts of the ecosystem near Lake Victoria, where there is a permanent water supply. Generally, the migration begins in May and June, and by August, the vast majority has crossed in the Masai Mara in Kenya. The migration is not without its risks. At the river crossings into Kenya, many of the wildebeest are lost, some taken by crocodiles, while others simply drowned. It is a risk that they take to get to greener pastures.